Welcome back to the Disturbed Chronicles. My name's Cams, and I'm glad you're here because today's video we're going to talk about the Idaho student murders, which was the murder of 4 University of Idaho college students from Moscow back in November of 2022. The 4 college students that lost their lives was Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Zaina Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. They were murdered by Brian Koberger, who was actually a PhD student at a nearby university. So how did these murders take place? Well, it's a Saturday night, and these 4 college students, Madison, Kaylee, Zaina, and Ethan, decided that they were going to go out for the night, like most college and young kids do, right? So Madison and Zaina, they lived in an off-campus home, and one of the friends, Kaylee, had recently moved out, but she still came by to hang out and see her friends. Ethan and Zaina were dating, and Ethan was going to stay the night at Zaina's off-campus house. And 2 other roommates were also living in this off-campus home, but they weren't a part of the events that took place. They just were witnesses. These 4 victims did not spend the entire night together. Zaina and Ethan attended a party on November 12th at a nearby fraternity, and Madison and Kaylee went to a sports bar in the area for a few hours. It is reported that all 4 of these students were home by 2 a.m. according to the surviving roommates. I believe this house had 3 floors, and one of the roommates actually heard crying coming from Zaina's room, and she also heard an unknown man say, "It's okay, I'm going to help you," which was around 4 a.m. in the morning on November 13th. The security camera footage actually picks up sounds of whimpering and a loud bang, and you can also hear a dog barking, which may have been Kaylee's dog because she did have her dog there at the house. This roommate also believed that they heard someone inside of the home say, "There's somebody here," but officials believe this may have came from a roommate's phone, being the fact that evidence shows Kaylee was on TikTok around this time. One of the surviving roommates actually opens up their door right around this time and peeks out, and that's when they notice a man, and he's wearing all black, and they watch this man actually exit through the back sliding door of their home. And this is believed to be how Brian Koberger actually got into this off-campus house of theirs. While these roommates were frozen in fear, they closed their door and they hid in their rooms. Bethany and Dylan, they didn't realize the gravity of the situation, and I don't think they understood exactly what was going on at this point in time, which is why they did not call the police immediately. The second and the third floor of this house is where the murders actually took place, and it wasn't till about 11:58 a.m., so about noon, when the 911 call was placed, which is about 7 hours after the murders actually happened. When the police arrived, they found no indication of forced entry or any damage done to the home. They did, however, find a knife sheath that had a Marine Corps logo on it, which it was next to the body of Madison and Kaylee, who were in the same room. The 4 college students, Kaylee and Madison, and Zaina and Ethan, which were also in the same room together, were all pronounced dead by noon on November 13th, 2022. Kaylee's dog was found on the 3rd floor alive and unharmed. Ethan Chapin was a 20-year-old freshman, and he was studying management, sports, and recreation. He was involved in the sorority life, and he was one of 3 triplets. He had a twin sister and a twin brother. Ethan was known as a fun, funny, kind, and a natural athlete. Kaylee Goncalves was 21 years old, and she was a senior. She was studying general studies, and she was set to graduate in December of this year, just a month before she died. Kaylee had accepted a job in Texas and was planning on moving out there after her graduation. She was known for her vibrant personality, and her and Madison were best friends. These 2 girls were lifelong friends since they met when they were both very young. Zaina Knodel was also 20 years old, and she was a junior. She was studying marketing, and she was also involved in the sorority life. Zaina was described as an energetic and athletic woman. Madison Mogan was 21 years old, and she was also a senior. She was studying marketing as well, and she was working on building a career in the marketing field. She was working at a local restaurant that Kaylee also worked at. Madison was described as a driven, warm, and incredibly loyal person. They were all attending the Idaho State University College. All 4 victims were stabbed to death, and they had multiple stab wounds to the chest and to the upper body with a large knife. 2 of the victims had defensive wounds to their hands, which suggests that they were in a struggle. They may have been asleep when they were attacked. There was no signs of sexual abuse on all 4 of these victims. The surviving roommates, Bethany and Dylan, saw the man and described him as 5'10", not very muscular, but did have an athletic build, and he had very thick eyebrows. A few days after the murders, the police requested anyone come forward with any videos from the house on that night. They provided a phone tip line along with an email. And by December 24th, which is just over a month after the murders, the police stated that they had received over 15,000 tips. It stated that Kaylee may have had a stalker, but that couldn't be further verified. Police were in search of a white Hyundai Elantra, since the camera actually picked up this car in the same area right around the time of the murders. And this same vehicle would make several drive-bys past this residence in a very short period of time on the night of the murders. 3 times to be specific, around 3:30 a.m., around 4:04 a.m., and again at 4:20 a.m. And the Hyundai was seen speeding away from the neighborhood around this time. There was footage that went viral online about the 2 girls, Madison and Kaylee, at a food truck the night they were murdered around 1:30 a.m. They stopped to get food before they went home, and you can see a man behind them wearing a hoodie with a baseball cap, and this guy was actually named the food truck guy. He was reportedly with the girls throughout the night at some point, and this video footage went viral, and everyone thought that this man was a suspect. You can actually see these 2 girls get into an argument with a man that is also waiting for food at the food truck. They exchange some words with each other, but the girls leave after getting their food, and you can see the man that was with them gestures in their direction, and then he follows them out of frame.
You see the girls walk into the frame and up to the food truck. It appears they're with a young man, the one in the hat and dark jacket. Here you can see him put his hood on. He hangs back several feet behind the girls as they order from the food truck. He then follows Kaylee and Maddie after they order and stands right next to them. It looks like he never ordered any food, but you can see him talking to other people there. Several minutes later, the girls grab their food, take a picture, laugh and talk to each other, and quickly walk away. One of the people the young man is talking to points out that the girls left. He throws up his hand, waits a moment, and then appears to walk after them. You see him wave at the girls and then walk a separate direction.
It is some very suspicious activity going on there, but these girls could have possibly been under the influence, considering they've been out all night. It's Saturday night, so alcohol could have been involved. But this man was ultimately not responsible for any of the murders, and he was cleared as a suspect. The police also analyzed cell phone data from nearby towers, and it shows that Brian was in the area of these students' home several times in the surrounding days before the murders. And that tan knife sheath that was left behind at the murder scene was a critical mistake by the killer Brian. And the police found DNA on this knife sheath, which was a match for Brian Koberger. It was a 99.998% match, to be exact. The police had been watching Brian Koberger for a while, and his family, and they actually grabbed something from their trash and they took it and tested it for DNA, and it came back as a blood relative match to the murderer. So with the evidence that they had, they arrest Brian Koberger on December 30th in Pennsylvania, where he went to be with his family for winter break. He was extradited back to Ohio, where he was charged with 4 counts of murder and 1 count of felony burglary. This arrest came as a shock for many people because Brian was a 28-year-old man pursuing a doctorate in criminology, which is a little ironic being the fact that, he murdered these 4 victims. Brian studied under well-known professors, and he has written many papers about the psychology of criminals. He even conducted interviews from ex-cons about how they chose their victims. Brian also applied for a job as an intern at a local police department in Pullman. This officer that interviewed Brian made a statement about his interview with the murderer.
Well, I recognized the name. I just immediately, I didn't remember from where, but it was probably within 30 seconds. Then I remembered where it was. And I do have to say the hair on the back of my neck stood up knowing that I had interviewed him. Had I selected him, he would have been embedded with the Pullman Police Department. But to know that here he was, the prime suspect in this quadruple homicide was chilling.
The police did have a lot of evidence on Brian, but they had no actual motive yet. It's stated that had Brian not left that knife sheath behind, he may have committed the perfect murder, and he may have never been caught. It's stated that Brian had no connection at all to these students, and he was reportedly calm and quiet during his arrest. But he did ask a question. He asked if anybody else had been arrested, and officials believe this is because of him consciously knowing that he was guilty. Brian remained very quiet throughout this entire process. Maybe this is because he knows what he's doing, being the fact that he's studied all of this and his knowledge of criminals. And according to the affidavit of probable cause, Brian never gave a detailed statement, but he did maintain his silence. The following year, in May of 2023, he was set for arraignment, and he stood silent, which made the court apply a not guilty plea on his behalf. And in spring of 2023, a gag order was set by the court for attorneys and law enforcement to prevent anyone from talking about this case with the media. And in June of 2023, the prosecutors announced that they will seek the death penalty due to it being multiple victims and such a heinous crime, and that it could mean Brian is a threat to the public. This trial had many, many delays, and continuing on into 2024, the defense wanted the trial to happen in the same county that the murders happened. They didn't believe Brian could get a fair trial due to the publicity in Moscow. They also requested detailed DNA results from the knife sheath, and it seems like the defense is pulling every move that they possibly can at this point in time. Meanwhile, during all of this, Brian still remains in jail throughout, and he has no bail. Reports say he had a very strict routine in jail that he followed every day. He would read, he would write, exercise every day, but he never spoke about anything to anyone, not the staff and not to any inmates. This year in 2025, the prosecution starts setting up a plea deal. They agree to drop the death penalty for a life sentence without the possibility of parole if he pleaded guilty to all 4 murders and the burglary charge. So in June of 2025, Brian accepted this plea bargain, and he pleaded guilty to all 5 charges.
4 University of Idaho students to death.
The murder of Madison Mogan, how do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
For the murder of Kaylee Gonsalves, how do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
The murder of Xana Kernodle, a human being, how do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
The murder of Ethan Chapin, a human being, how do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Brian actually signs a formal written confession, but he doesn't really state exactly what he did in detail. He said he willingly, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice murdered Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan. And this sentencing is set for this month on July 23rd, 2025. During the sentencing, the victim impact statements from the families are going to be made. Brian will also be sentenced for all 4 murders, which should be 4 consecutive life sentences plus 10 years for the burglary. And while Brian has been incarcerated, he has been described by staff as a respectful, quiet, and structured person. But till this day, Brian has not discussed publicly with anyone the details of this case. And this case is actually very similar to my last video about Savannah Spurlock, because her murderer, David Sparks, also pleaded guilty in order to avoid the death penalty. He also never spoke about the case or what he did to Savannah. Brian and David are very similar in that aspect. I don't know if murderers are getting smarter about the things that they say, but it's very interesting because both of these cases are fairly new. It is suggested by many people that Maddie or Madison was the main target. Unfortunately, we may never know why Brian did such a horrendous thing to these 4 innocent college students. They were young and beautiful, and they had so much more life to live. But at least we can say that he is behind bars and he will be found guilty for his actions. But some people don't think that it is enough. And we will soon have some more updates about it this coming week. Brian's sentencing is scheduled for this Wednesday on July 23rd, and I may post a short video about Brian's sentencing. So stay tuned for that. And they also do have a documentary available on Prime Video and Netflix. It's called The Idaho Student Murders. You can go check that out if you are interested in learning more about this case. Now, I want to take this time to thank all 175 of my subscribers. You guys are awesome. I appreciate y'all so much. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Join the community. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a comment below and let me know. Hit that like button, and hopefully I'll see you on the next disturbing video.